Hey everyone, today we are going to talk about some of the most recent developments in the Charlie Kirk case because so many more details have been coming to light and it is not making any more sense than it originally made when the FBI started telling us about Tyler Robinson as the culprit and just all of the details that they shared initially. I was hoping that maybe some of the inconsistencies would be cleared up and some explanation would be provided for some of the things that just didn't make sense. But instead, more and more pieces of evidence are piling up that do not line up at all. So that's what I want to get into with you all today. Specifically, first of all, I want to talk about George Zinn. He is the man who was initially arrested when Charlie Kirk was shot. There are a lot of wild rumors flying around the internet about George Zinn, and some of them may be true, but several of them seem to be fabricated or exaggerated. Essentially, the stories went through the internet telephone, that game Telephone, and people kept repeating them and they got wilder and wilder, and I don't think that what people are saying about George Zinn at this point is accurate. We're also going to talk about Tyler Robinson, the man who the FBI says they believe killed Charlie Kirk. He hasn't confessed yet, so that's interesting, but there are several things about his story, his past, and his movements on that day that, again, aren't lining up. We're also going to look at some facts about the rifle that purportedly was used to kill Charlie Kirk. I'm no gun expert, but there are some blatantly obvious problems with the weapon that they are saying was used. We're also definitely going to talk about the autopsy, or the lack of autopsy, and what has been shared by Andrew Colvett from TPUSA about this miraculous bullet that didn't go through Charlie's body. So all that and more coming up in today's episode. All right, so starting out, let's talk about George Zinn. So moments after Charlie was shot, this man in the crowd named George Zinn, who apparently is an Ashkenazi Jew, started shouting that he did it, that he shot Charlie. So law enforcement immediately arrested him. Now, I don't think it could have been the FBI because he was arrested and in handcuffs within 1 minute, less than 1 minute from the time that Charlie was shot. Now, that is very strange to me. I do not know even how law enforcement was there that quickly. I know the FBI didn't arrive on the scene until many minutes later, I believe around half an hour later. But I'm not sure why there was law enforcement there already, or how they so quickly identified him, or how they had him in handcuffs right around the same place where Charlie was shot just 1 minute later. That's very fast work. And that raises some questions in my mind. I wonder if maybe they were possibly somehow tipped off, somehow ready to make that arrest. Also, just as many people have already pointed out, it is awfully strange that this man decided to suddenly start shouting that he did it. George Zinn has himself said at this point, in his own words, that he did this to try to help the shooter get away. Very odd. Don't know what would motivate that. It is, though, I will say, strange that he would admit that if he is part of some sort of conspiracy. You would think that they would tell him not to say something like that. I don't know, just asking questions here. Another strange thing about George Zinn, and this one I think is just a rumor because I have not been able to find any verification of it at all. A lot of people, including some very big names, have been saying that George Zinn was also an eyewitness of 9/11, and that he was the first person to call in the bomb threat at the Boston Marathon bombing. Now, both of these things do not seem to be true as far as I can tell. What I did find was that George Zinn claims to have been an eyewitness to the 9/11 attack, but he claimed it much after the fact. And it seems like maybe he was just trying to get attention for himself. And then also, as far as the Boston Marathon bombing goes, he did call in a bomb threat. There are news reports of that, but he certainly was not the first person. In fact, from what I can find, he was one of the later people to call in that bomb threat. So it is rather odd. George Zinn does seem to be a quite odd person who likes to insert himself into not just disastrous situations, but specifically kind of like terrorist type of attacks. So that is very odd. I do find it suspicious, but I did want to dispel some of those rumors that I've heard online that don't seem to quite be true. Now, one thing that does seem to be conclusive about George Zinn, this has been reported by many major news outlets and by law enforcement as well, I believe the Utah State Police, is that George Zinn, after he was arrested, they found child porn on his phone. And so now he is in custody, I believe in jail in some capacity. And some people have pointed out that this is kind of convenient because it means that now nobody can question George Zinn. He is in custody, so nobody can even get access to him. Now, maybe that's just a coincidence, but it does seem quite odd and somewhat convenient. Okay, now let's move on and talk about Tyler Robinson. So Tyler Robinson, he's the man who they ultimately have declared is the culprit, the man who did shoot Charlie Kirk, and they have him in custody. First thing I want to mention about him is that he has not confessed yet. And I think that that is pretty concerning because if Tyler Robinson is colluding with the feds, is colluding with law enforcement in some sort of cover-up or conspiracy here, then obviously they are going to be offering him some sort of protection. He wouldn't have agreed to conspire with them if he is ultimately going to face the death penalty or something like that, right? And so they're going to have some sort of out, some sort of way to let him off the hook. Now, I think that there's several ways that could potentially happen. It could be that ultimately they say there's not enough evidence that he actually did the crime. That would be interesting, right, if they claimed that after all of these pieces of evidence that they've presented to us. And in that case, of course, they would also be pointing out that he hadn't confessed, and so they couldn't convict him of the crime. There's also the very real possibility, I think this one is most likely, that they do convict him of the crime, but then his sentence ends up being shortened or changed in some way so that he doesn't really serve nearly as much time as everybody thinks that he should, and certainly he doesn't go on to face the death penalty. And then another possibility, of course, would be that somehow they end up offing him. I don't know what will happen, obviously, but those are three possibilities that I can think of. So he hasn't confessed yet. Now, another thing I want to look at here is that there's actually zero evidence of Robinson ever being in possession of the rifle that they are saying killed Charlie Kirk. We have multiple photos of him. We have that video of him jumping off the roof of the building where they're saying the shot was taken. And there are a couple of frames in that video where people say, oh, look, that shape there, that could be a rifle. And there are obviously those photos of Tyler Robinson walking up the stairwell, and people are examining those and wondering if maybe his leg looks a little stiff. Does he have something down his pant leg? But the fact of the matter is that in none of this footage is it obvious that he is holding a rifle. And in fact, in most of it, seems pretty blatantly obvious that he is not. Now, with this footage and these photos that have been released, it seems awfully odd that the FBI has released as little as they have. So take this video, for example, where a man who we are being told is Tyler Robinson is seen jumping off the roof. It is very obvious from this video that you would be able to see, that you can see the place from which the shot was allegedly taken. Okay, you can see where the man starts running from, and you can tell this really easily from a simple look at Google Earth, where you can look from the direction of the 360 camera on the computer science building that took that video that we're looking at over onto the roof of that other building. It's quite obvious that you can see that spot where that man was laying on the roof, and you could see the man laying on the roof from at least some of the cell phone footage taken from the crowd. So that's really interesting. We can see the spot, and yet for some reason, the video that the FBI released to us, and it's on the FBI website, you can see it right here, of the man running across the roof and then jumping off the roof onto the grass, certainly doesn't seem to be holding a rifle, but for some reason that video starts 3 seconds after the shot was taken. That is very strange. Why did they cut that part of the video off? That would almost dispel all of the conspiracy here. Now, not quite, I don't think, because of course it is entirely possible that Tyler Robinson did take the shot, and there is still a conspiracy, right? That there were other people involved. And, from the start on this case, I've been saying I think that there is strong evidence that Tyler Robinson at least didn't act alone. So I'm not saying Tyler Robinson definitely didn't take the shot. I would say that with the evidence that I've learned in the last week or so, and some of the things I'm going to share with you later in today's episode, it doesn't seem to me like he probably was the person who took the shot, that he probably was not the man, the person who killed Charlie Kirk. But even if he was, it definitely seems like there were at least other people involved. But anyway, the big question is, why did they start that video 3 seconds after the shot was taken? Just doesn't make sense. We've also got, like I said, those photos in the stairwell. Why didn't they release the video of Tyler Robinson walking up those stairs? Is it because we would have been able to tell that he definitely did not have a 40-inch long rifle on his person? Maybe. I don't know any other reason, but maybe there is some other reason. Now, something that the internet has been talking a lot about in the past few days is this photo of Tyler Robinson in Dairy Queen on the day of Charlie Kirk's assassination. So the photo from Dairy Queen is apparently from 6:38 p.m. Now, here's what is not conclusive about this photo at all, like why this photo doesn't actually prove anything. It wasn't released from Dairy Queen itself, and it hasn't been officially released by law enforcement at all. In fact, this photo was apparently privately provided to Candace Owens. That's a little strange. Why didn't the individual who was providing it to Candace Owens post it publicly? How did they get it? Like, that all seems a little strange to me, but as Candace pointed out in one of her recent episodes, it seems pretty unlikely that this photo could possibly be from any other date, because how would someone have found the photo of Tyler Robinson in a Dairy Queen on another date? And also, security cameras like that typically only store footage for between 24 hours up to possibly as long as 1 week. But they are writing over themselves, and so if it was older than about a week, then there is just no way that that footage would still be around. Also, in the photo from Dairy Queen, Tyler Robinson is wearing a shirt that looks identical to one of the shirts that the FBI says Tyler Robinson was wearing on that day. For some reason, they have him in at least 2 different outfits. The first outfit they say he was in was kind of a dark red shirt and light colored shorts. Then later we have those photos and video of him wearing that American flag long sleeve black shirt and some dark jeans and a ball cap. So there's been no explanation for why he changed clothes from the red shirt to the dark outfit and then apparently back to the red shirt. They say that was the outfit he was in when they arrested him. That doesn't make very much sense. I don't see any reason for that at all. But now in this photo from Dairy Queen, we have him in the red shirt and the dark jeans. So it seems overly coincidental that this photo could be from a different date and that somebody could have found it and that he would be in basically the same outfit. So it does seem quite overly coincidental that somebody could have managed to find this photo of him in Dairy Queen from a different date and that he would be in the same outfit as well. Now, what we notice in this photo, the thing that really stands out to it is, this is right at about 6 hours after Charlie Kirk was shot. And so Tyler Robinson, based on, the narrative that is being presented, he should have been running for his life, fearing for his life, in hiding, something like that, right? But instead we find him at Dairy Queen, looking very casual and very relaxed and ordering some food. And if I had just shot a man 6 hours before, that is certainly not what I would have been doing. And in fact, according to the texts that the FBI released between Tyler Robinson and his boyfriend, the texts where, he explains everything, he explains why he killed Charlie Kirk and confesses that he killed Charlie Kirk and talks about the rifle and where he put the rifle and just gives all of the details in way too much detail and with way too advanced of a vocabulary, as I pointed out in my very first episode last week. In those texts, he says that he is waiting in his vehicle, that there are squad cars on the scene that are between him and his vehicle, but he is waiting to recover the weapon. So it doesn't really make any sense that he would have gone to Dairy Queen while he is waiting to recover the weapon that he never recovered, apparently. You know, law enforcement says that they found it in a wooded area. So I really don't know why he would have been stopping at Dairy Queen if he had that fear on his mind that they were going to find the rifle. And allegedly, the only reason that he was still in the area at all was because he was waiting to recover the rifle. So if he had given up on recovering the rifle, he certainly would not have stuck around in that area where there was a major manhunt going on. He would have gone back to either his apartment, which was in a different city several hours away, or else possibly gone back to his parents' place, which I believe is where the FBI ended up apprehending him or arresting him, taking him into custody from. So now let's talk about Tyler Robinson's background, which is just a little bit strange. So first of all, Tyler Robinson, prior to going to college at all, he had a very good academic history. He had a 4.0 GPA and had scored a 34 out of 36 on the ACT. So that is a very high score on the ACT. And these exceptional academics had earned him a full scholarship to Utah State University. So Tyler has been doing well in school. He gets the scholarship. He goes to Utah State University only to drop out after one semester. Why would he do that? That seems strange to me. Now, one thing that has been revealed that is a little bit interesting, now this is totally circumstantial evidence. It is very much correlation, not causation. That's not quite the right term for this, but I think you know what I mean. It doesn't prove anything at all. But purportedly, and this isn't just like internet hearsay, there are plenty of articles online that back this up, and evidence specifically from people in the intelligence sector themselves, that UVU, Utah State University, has strong ties with intelligence and is a place that intelligence, specifically the CIA, actively recruits from. And specifically, UVU apparently offers a master's degree in something called anticipatory intelligence. I think the name kind of says it all. Basically, it's kind of like pre-med for doctors, okay? This is a degree for people to get if they want to go into intelligence. So again, totally circumstantial, but Tyler Robinson goes to this university that has strong ties to intelligence and specifically the CIA. He is a top-level student, and then he mysteriously drops out after one semester. Like I said, doesn't prove anything. It's just a little bit odd. Now let's move on and talk about the weapon that was used. So there is this photo of the rifle that was purportedly used in the shooting. And in the photo, we can see that it is a modern Mauser rifle. Now, I am no gun expert, but I have seen multiple videos from multiple different gun experts here on YouTube, people who deal with guns on a daily basis, and many of these people are ex-military, some of them are sharpshooters. Okay, they know their way around guns, and they are telling us that this is a modern Mauser rifle. And why that is interesting is because in those texts that the FBI says were between Tyler Robinson and his boyfriend, where Tyler Robinson explains everything, Tyler says that this is his grandfather's rifle, and that it was from World War I. And it seems that the reason why this was inserted into the story was for this additional fact, which is that therefore it doesn't have a serial number, so it is untraceable. Well, that's convenient, but also does not really match this photo, which does not look like a World War I rifle. And if it is a World War I rifle, would it really be accurate for this precision shot at 140 yards? I don't know. I'm not a gun expert, but that seems a bit unlikely to me, especially if he just got it from his grandfather or his dad and he is going to have to replace it. It doesn't sound like this is something that Tyler Robinson permanently has in his possession and has been using a lot or has had a lot of work done on or anything like that. He, in these texts, is talking about how he got to get it back so he can return it so that his dad or his grandfather doesn't wonder where it went. Now, I also did want to mention two things that I brought up in my episode last week about the rifle, but I think that they deserve a little bit more attention. One is that the FBI is saying that Tyler Robinson assembled and disassembled the gun a couple of times, that he brought it onto the roof in parts and then put it together on the roof, then disassembled it to take it off the roof. But then in the picture we have of it after they found it in the woods, it is assembled. And the timing with this just really does not make sense. I checked out quite a few videos here on YouTube with gun experts assembling and disassembling rifles similar to the one that Robinson allegedly used, and it took most of them at least about a minute to take the rifle apart or put it back together. And yet in that video released from the FBI of Robinson running across the roof after allegedly taking the shot, he's running 3 seconds after the shot was fired. So there's just no time at all for him to have taken the gun apart. And it seems like the reason that they told us that from the start was to provide an excuse for the fact that we didn't see the gun in his hands in that video. But the timeline just does not match up. There's no way that that could be possible. The other thing about the rifle is I was talking in my last episode about the scope on the rifle. Again, I am no gun expert, so I definitely would not have noticed this myself, but apparently the scope on the gun is significantly further back than it should have been, and so not only would that make it very difficult for him to take the shot, but it means that when he took the shot, the scope would have punched him in the eye, probably giving him a black eye, and I guess this is called getting scoped. And yet, in the photos we've seen of Tyler Robinson from his arrest, he clearly doesn't have a black eye. Now, of course, that doesn't prove anything. Possibly he somehow managed to avoid that. But again, just one more thing that doesn't quite line up. Okay, so now I want to talk about the shot. So now we're going to get into some things that definitely are not my area of expertise by any means, but I think that they make sense and it's definitely something to look into. So there's this thing called a crack bang analysis where the sound from a gunshot can be analyzed to discern how far away a camera was from a gun at the time of the shooting, okay? So like I said, I don't know much about this, but I looked it up on Google, and here's what Google says. It says a crack bang analysis is a method used to estimate the distance and direction of a shooter based on the sounds produced by a supersonic bullet. The core of the technique relies on the difference in arrival times between the bullet's sonic boom, that's the crack, and the gun's muzzle blast, that's the bang. The crack bang method works because of two fundamental principles of physics. Supersonic bullets. Many rifle bullets travel faster than the speed of sound. This creates a shock wave or sonic boom as it passes. An observer will hear this crack sound first because the bullet reaches them before the sound of the gunshot does. And then the speed of sound, the muzzle blast or bang travels at the speed of sound, obviously, right? Since the bullet is faster, the crack arrives first, followed by that bang sound. The time delay between these sounds is directly proportional to the shooter's distance. Okay, so even though I don't know anything about this, that makes a lot of sense. I understand how that would work. So basically, how this relates to the Tyler Robinson, Charlie Kirk case is that there were lots of people filming Charlie Kirk with their cell phones at the time that the shot went off. And then these videos have been posted online. So some crack bang analyses have been done on the footage from these different videos. And what's interesting is that apparently crack bang analysis, it normally is just going to tell you basically the distance of the camera from the gunshot. But if you have at least 3 different videos from 3 different locations, you can use those circles of distance, if you will, to triangulate the location that the gun was fired from. And the location that you can see here that is triangulated by these crack bang analyses clearly is a very different location than the rooftop location that Robinson was apparently in at the time of the shooting. And so that would be to say that the shot was taken from a different place, that Robinson did not take the shot, and that it was taken from either this building to the right of Charlie or from someone kind of to the right of the crowd. So, I don't know for sure if that is conclusive because, like I said, this is not my area of expertise, but it certainly seems like some strong evidence. Now, there are several puzzle pieces here relating to where the shot was taken from. We've got that crack bang analysis. We also have the way in which the bullet impacted Charlie, which I think is pretty significant. We'll look at that in a moment. And then you also have footage from many different people's cell phones, and some of it seems to show a bullet flying towards Charlie and then flying away from him after the shot. Now, there's quite a debate online about whether a cell phone would be able to capture a bullet flying through the air at such a great velocity. But the conclusion that I've seen seems to be Yes. Now, you wouldn't be able to see the bullet flying exactly, but it would show up in several frames. So, for example, if your phone is shooting at, say, 60 frames per second, then that means in a second you're going to have these 60 individual stills. Now, the bullet would only be flying through the angle that the camera is capturing for a split second. And I mean that quite literally, a fraction of a second, for sure. But there are a few reasons why I do think that it makes a lot of sense that the bullet would be captured. And also, there was a video that Ian Carroll put up just a few days ago in which he had AI do the math of the probability of this, but just in very simple terms here. And we can look at that in a moment. But in very simple terms here, a phone typically shoots with quite a wide angle so that people can capture as much of a scene as possible. So we have this wide field of vision that means that the bullet will be traveling through for a longer period of time than with a more narrow field of vision. Then you have the fact that quite a few people were filming Charlie. So even if the chances of the bullet being captured by any one individual cell phone are relatively low, the fact that you now have multiple people shooting greatly increases the odds, okay? Greatly multiplies the odds that the bullet would be captured. And of course, we're not saying that you would see the bullet in every frame, if you've got 60 frames in a second, but out of those 60 frames in a second, it is quite possible that the bullet would be captured in a handful of them. So let's now take a listen to Ian Carroll's math on this real quick.
A handgun round. Time to cross a 100-foot field of view would be 83.3 milliseconds. So there would be 5 frames through which the bullet would pass. The bullet would appear in multiple consecutive frames. For a 30-06 round, it would probably appear in about 2.1 frames. Under these conditions, the probability changes from astronomical odds to actual near certainty. A handgun would have 99% probability of appearing in at least one frame, likely 3 to 5 frames consecutively. And that's obviously assuming that it's against a dark background with enough light bouncing off of it that you can see the bullet against its background. And in this case, both frames that we have the bullet appearing in, it's against Charlie's black pants in the latter frame, and in the frame before it impacts, it's against a man with a black shirt. We would expect it in 3 to 5 consecutive frames, and we see it in like one frame behind him, one frame on impact, maybe a frame inside of his neck and a frame coming down past his knee. Right? Like, that kind of lines up.
Now, as for specifically what was captured in these cell phone videos, we see a small object that seems to be flying towards the back of Charlie's neck in some footage. And then we can also see a small object flying away from Charlie and kind of towards the ground. And that part of the footage looks much more like a bullet to me than the other part. However, it does make sense that the object we see flying, it might not look like a bullet because, again, if it's only being captured in perhaps a single frame and it's flying through so fast, it makes sense that it might just show up as a dot, and we don't know what else it might be. But of course, it could just be some sort of noise in the footage. That is possible. So now we're going to get into what I think is some of the most significant evidence against the shot being fired from the gun that law enforcement is telling us it was fired from. So apparently this is a Mauser that shoots a bullet that is a 30-06. Now, I don't really know what that means, but here's a picture that shows the difference in these different sizes of bullets. And you can see that this right here is a 9mm, okay? And you might be familiar with how big a 9mm or a 45 bullet is that might be shot from like a handgun. That is something that I can use kind of as a size reference here. The 30-06, it is quite a bit bigger, right? And I thought that this comment kind of explained the problem here. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself though, because the big issue with this 30-06 bullet is the fact that we are now being told that it somehow did not exit Charlie's body. And I think the reason why this is being shared with us is to explain why nobody that was behind Charlie got hit, and maybe why there isn't blood splatter on the background behind Charlie, because that's a big thing I wanted to bring up to you guys today. There was a white background behind Charlie. If he was shot from the front, which you typically see with an entrance wound is a very small entrance wound that doesn't bleed immediately, and then a blast out of the back. And here we could look at some footage of some concrete being shot with a rifle similar to the one that they are saying Charlie was shot with. As you can see, It enters in the front and it completely blasts out the back. And if you saw the footage of Charlie being shot, it clearly was a very big explosive sort of wound, not like a small entrance wound, which has a lot of people speculating that it was an exit wound, not an entrance wound. And if it is an exit wound, then where was he shot from? Maybe off to his right, as that crack bang analysis seems to indicate. And in that case, we're looking at a shot that came from his right, passed through his neck, and exited. And that would explain those small objects that we see in some cell phone footage. Okay, and now to get over to this post about the bullet that didn't exit Charlie's body. Now, this post that Andrew Colvett, who is a spokesperson for Turning Point USA, and he was Charlie's co-host on his podcast, it has a lot of people pretty worked up. People who were suspicious before, but they were kind of giving the benefit of the doubt to the government, and they were being hesitant to jump on any conspiracy theories. And then this post came out trying to dispel some of the problems with the case, and instead it now has a lot of people way more suspicious than they were before. So let's just read it. I want to address some of the discussion about the lack of an exit wound with Charlie. So first of all, I want to just point out here that Andrew is acknowledging that there isn't an exit wound, that something is strange about this, that something doesn't add up. He says, I'm usually not interested in delving into most of this kind of online chatter, and I apologize, this is somewhat graphic, but in this case, the fact that there wasn't an exit wound is probably another miracle, and I want people to know. I just spoke with a surgeon who worked on Charlie in the hospital. Now, I find that quite strange because I don't think, based on what we saw, that anyone probably worked on Charlie in the hospital. He lost so much blood initially that what everybody has been saying, including Erica said on stage at Charlie's memorial, is that he blinked and was with Jesus, okay? That he died practically immediately from the extreme loss of blood. So nobody would have been working on him. He was taken to the hospital and declared dead. And that's what I've read in news reports as well, that he was taken to the hospital and declared dead. Anyway, Andrew goes on. He said the bullet, he being the surgeon, said the bullet absolutely should have gone through, which is very normal for a high-powered, high-velocity round. I've seen wounds from this caliber many times, and they always just go through everything. This would have taken a moose or two down, an elk, etc. But it didn't go through. Charlie's body stopped it. That really would be quite a miracle, wouldn't it? Considering what we see with this bullet down here that this person shared. Yeah. And what this person says here is a 30-06 would go through level 3 body armor, most tree trunks you encounter in your average forest hikes, grizzly bears, and even half an inch of steel on lightly armored vehicles. Yet somehow you want us to believe it was stopped by Charlie's neck. Either you are a useful fool that is being told lies and are repeating them, or you are in on the cover-up. Which is it? The real story is that he was shot from behind and to his right. Now, again, I don't know if that's true, but this person seems to think that as well. And the wound we see is an exit wound. And you must know this because you have the security camera footage that was illegally taken from the scene of a crime and for which that security guard or operative that took it should be under prosecution for evidence tampering. Yet he is not. So this plot must go pretty deep. He summarized that very well there, which is why I wanted to read that. Now, Andrew goes on with something that I find almost harder to believe. So he says that the surgeon says his bone was so healthy and the density was so impressive that he's like the man of steel. It should have just gone through and through. I agree. It likely would have killed those standing behind him too. In the end, the coroner did find the bullet just beneath the skin. That's the part that I'm like, what? You found it just beneath the skin? That doesn't line up with what I saw in the video where there was an explosion of blood. Nothing stopped there, okay? It all exploded. There was no skin right there for it to be under anymore. Doesn't make any sense. And if the bullet had gone in and not exited, it would be deep inside. It wouldn't be just under the skin. Andrew finishes up. Even in death, Charlie managed to save the lives around him. Remarkable, miraculous. So people online are calling this like the magic bullet. Now, I definitely believe in miracles, but what I find so suspicious about this is that this miracle is working to explain things that don't make sense in a case where so many things don't make sense. So it just seems very overly convenient to me that there, happens to be this miracle that explains some of these things that don't make sense, like why there isn't any blood splatter on the background or why the bullet hasn't been recovered. But even here, Andrew is saying that now the bullet has been recovered, and yet the FBI didn't come out and say, look, we have the bullet and it matches the gun. None of that has been said, and that just seems very, very strange to me. Now, that comment on X that I read a couple of minutes ago where the individual was speculating about how Andrew Colvett was involved. Is he being lied to? Is he part of the cover-up? Obviously, we don't know what's going on here at all. But it kind of brings me to the last thing that I wanted to talk about today, which is how deep does this cover-up go? It seems very obvious that the FBI, at least, is involved in this cover-up, since they are actively investigating this crime, so they would know the true facts of the matter, and yet they're reporting all sorts of things that simply don't make sense, and they're not pointing out that they don't make sense. So their involvement seems quite obvious. But who else is involved, right? Trump has been pretty involved with the situation. He has been kind of the spokesperson for some of the reporting that has come out about it. For example, about the fact that they had arrested Tyler Robinson, and he was in fact the person who first reported, at least that I saw, that Charlie had in fact passed away. So he'd been very closely involved with this case. And so we have to wonder, are the Trumps somehow involved in this cover-up? Or are they just being lied to? And then what about people at TPUSA? Andrew Colvett, he is either being lied to or he is lying. And what about Erica Kirk? Now, obviously, I'm not saying here that I think that anybody at Turning Point USA or Erica Kirk certainly had anything to do with Charlie's death. I don't believe that for a second. But these people are saying things that indicate that they believe the narrative that doesn't make any sense. And sometimes they are even the people who are telling us information that doesn't make any sense. So are they just being lied to? And if so, why aren't they speaking out about these things that don't make sense? Or are they somehow part of the cover-up? And if so, why? All right, friends, that's everything for today. Thank you so much for being here with me. I hope that you found this interesting, and I hope that you are enjoying the new show. Yes, this is a new show. This is a new channel. Maybe you've seen me on my other channel in the past, but you might not be subscribed to this new channel. So if you want to make sure that you catch all the future episodes, right now I'm trying to do 2 per week. Don't know exactly what the future of this show will look like, but if you want to find out when those new episodes are released, then make sure that you subscribe to this new channel. And it would also be so helpful for growing this new show if you gave this video a like and left a comment below with some of your takeaways or just your take on all of this that's going down with Charlie Kirk's case.